Hello and welcome. My name is John Van Etten. I'm the Managing Director of Human Synergistics office here in Germany, and I'd like to welcome you to yet another one of our informative webinars. Today's topic is on tool or instrument combinations that make the difference. So thank you for taking the time today to join. We'll talk about combinations of instruments from Human Synergistics and the benefits of using those combinations, and I'll be available at the end of this discussion for questions as well, if you have any. So for those of you who are familiar with Human Synergistics, you may be aware that we have instruments at a variety of what we call levels, instruments that measure behavioral patterns at the individual level, like LSI, those similar patterns in the group and team level with our group instrument, the GSI, or Group Styles Inventory. We measure the influence that leaders have over the behavior of the people whom they lead with our impact instruments, and we measure organizational cultural patterns with our OCI culture tool. So as you're seeing on the slide here, these are the four levels of instruments that Human Synergistics has developed over the past 56 years, I believe. And while these tools are used very, very broadly, and the majority of our network does tend to sort of focus or specialize on one level of these instruments or the other. For example, many of our consultants and coaches specialize on leadership development with LSI or our impact tools. Other consultants and coaches specialize in team development or organizational culture. And therefore, those coaches tend to sort of focus and specialize on one of the levels of our tools. However, I have to also say that the majority of our clients, the end users who actually benefit from these instruments in the end, use a combination of tools. Very often, for example, we're looking not only at measuring organizational culture, but as you'll see, looking at aspects of leadership, how leaders are influencing that culture, so that we can develop both leaders and the organization's culture simultaneously and understand that information in a greater context. So I think you'll see that as I go through these examples, the benefits hopefully of using that combination and the additional perspectives and insights that that provides. So at each of these levels, of course, and just very briefly, we have a model that we use to illustrate how these tools actually play out in terms of not only the behavioral patterns, and that's, of course, our circumplex model that we use across each of these levels, giving our clients one common language, one common model to understand patterns in leadership, team dynamics, and across organizational culture. At each one of these levels, then we have a specific model to illustrate the cause and effect structure that's playing out. So here, starting at the bottom of the list with the individual level lifestyles inventory, where we're looking at and measuring individual psychological and behavioral patterns, as well as outcomes along the lines of effectiveness and well-being as a result of those patterns. At the group and team level, a very similar model, looking at team dynamics, again, patterns of behavior playing out within that group or team, and then how those patterns influence the ability of team members to utilize skills, specifically rational versus interpersonal skills, and thereby the extent to which that skill use and those team dynamics influence the effectiveness of team members, as well as their satisfaction and motivation as members of that group or team. At the impact level, we're looking at several pieces. Again, I won't get too deeply into this. If you're curious about our models or would like more information on what exactly we're measuring here and why, please reach out. Happy to help. But very briefly here, we're looking at leaders' description on the left-hand side of their ideal impact, essentially what kind of behavior leaders describe they would like to encourage, reinforce in the people whom they lead. Secondarily, we're looking at strategies, essentially the methods by which leaders use the authority that they have in the organization. Those strategies then influence behavior, and this is the current impact that we find from those leaders. And finally, on the right-hand side, we're looking at outcomes related to the leader's own effectiveness across a variety of criteria. And then finally, at the organizational level, we're measuring not only organizational culture, but ideal culture as described by the organization, organizational climate in one complete, what we call how culture works model. So again, won't get into this too deeply. We have great resources and videos and additional content to explain those models. Assuming that you have some familiarity with those tools, then I'll move ahead to the primary topic here of how these tools can be used in combination to provide additional insights and support and enable development. So the first of these combinations I'd like to look at is the combination of individual behavior as well as team behavior, looking at patterns therein and performance. So these are the instruments sort of highlighted on the left-hand side, and these are the models that we're referring to. Again, the team patterns and how those influence members' ability to utilize skills and perform at their best, as compared to individual patterns of behavior and well-being and outcomes. Typically, one of the very interesting things to look at when we look at individual behavior in comparison, direct comparison with team behavior, again, assuming that the individuals are also part of that team, we really get some interesting insights into, how I think and behave as an individual and how that may differ as a result of working within a group or team. And also reflecting on topics such as how my individual behavior influences the team and thereby affects other members. So this ability to, again, not only measure behavioral patterns and the consequences and effect that they have on our people and teams, but understand directly how the behavior of individuals influences the team, vice versa, how patterns within the team or group have influenced the individuals, is tremendously helpful in not only understanding how these dynamics function, but in being most effective moving forward to personally role model behaviors that are most positive and conducive to performance, and to enable members to bring those out within the group and act on those kinds of behaviors in practice. So I think I have a slide here. Here we go. Just talking about sort of the top three benefits, I think, of using individual measurements like LSI with team level GSI behavior. So the first is that we see individual and team alignment through this message. So this helps us to really align and understand what kind of behavior not only I am currently utilizing or is currently playing out in the team, but as we have clarity and gain an understanding of what we want moving forward, what kind of behavior we should be role modeling and engaging in, then we have this method where we can really promote that behavior both on a team dynamic level as well as on an individual level. The conflict resolution. So again, by helping to identify what's actually playing out, what the dynamics within the team are, what each individual member is contributing, we can be tremendously helpful in not only identifying where these sources of conflict may be coming from, but I think most importantly, learning from that and coaching our individuals and teams to work in more collaborative and conducive and effective ways. And finally, demonstrating development and improvement. So LSI is an individual level tool, while we absolutely do remeasure with that instrument and provide progress checks where our participants can see how they've changed over time, how that's developed positively, and how that's driving more positive outcomes. We have to keep in mind that those individual level tools are very much confidential, not something that we can share openly in a leadership team meeting, for example. However, the GSI is a combined profile. And in that case, we do have confidentiality protected. And therefore, not only can we initially measure team dynamics with that instrument, but after coaching and developing these individuals for a period of 6 or 9 months, we can remeasure with those tools and we can demonstrate to the team quite openly, not only how this team behaved previously, but how we are interacting currently, what that change is. And individuals can recognize that shift not only in the team, but in their own profiles. So it creates this really nice win-win development learning experience where we think about how we should be working together. We each take responsibility for behaving in those kinds of ways, take steps to action that. And then as we remeasure, not only are we seeing that I'm behaving differently, but that pattern is really showing up in our group and team and benefiting our members as a result. So illustrating that connection between the individual and the team and the individual, I think is very, very helpful. And being able to show the profiles as we develop, at least at the team level, again, is a very nice way to demonstrate improvement. All right, so that was the first combination of individual and team. Now we sort of jump to the other end of our tools, looking at the organizational level in combination with the impact level. So this is one of my favorite combinations, obviously, since I've included it, but for a few reasons. One, firstly, is I put the models up for both the impact tools on the bottom in the purple versus the organizational level tools in the orange toward the top. You can see the striking similarity in terms of the models that we're looking at. And in fact, conceptually, when we break this down, there are parallels there, specifically, and really one that I'll highlight is the fact that we're really measuring similar concepts. On the far left-hand side of each of these models, we're measuring an ideal. In the impact tools, we're asking the leaders individually what their ideal impact would be. What kind of behavior do you want to encourage, foster, reinforce in the team that you lead? The profile toward the top is ideal culture, meaning when we ask our people within this organization what should be taking place, what would enable them to perform most effectively, what are they describing? So in any case, the quick message here is that firstly, we tend to find very similar descriptions. When leaders describe the kind of behavior they want to see from people, it tends to be goal-oriented achievement, getting things done, solving problems, learning from mistakes, helping one another, collaborating, and so on. And interestingly, when we ask people within organizations what kind of behavior they would prefer to experience, it would be most effective if that was taking place, they describe very, very similar patterns: working towards goals, achieving things, solving problems, learning from mistakes, collaborating, supporting one another, and so on. So in any case, this creates what I like to refer to as a shared leadership mindset, meaning we have the ability to directly compare what do I think should be encouraged personally in this organization versus what we've described as being an ideal culture. Typically, you find a lot of similarity. Interestingly, for development, occasionally you'll find differences in those descriptions. Maybe I, as a leader, think something else should be encouraged, very different from the ideal described more broadly. In that case, again, you have a real learning opportunity, and it's very powerful as a first step in culture development to help our leaders to align sort of their minds in terms of what behavior do we want, what's going to lead us forward, what's consistent with our values, what is good leadership, what should I role model and encourage. And if we can make that very clear to leaders across our leadership teams, that's tremendously helpful in shaping and driving a positive organizational culture. Another comparison point that's very helpful across these tools, and I spend quite a bit of time on with clients as well, is comparing the current state across these different levels. So again, when we're talking about the impact tools, we're looking at what I, as an individual leader, or of course, we can also create composite reports where we look at what we as a combined leadership team are currently encouraging in our teams and people. And secondarily, we can measure the current operating culture of the organization. This comparison has always been interesting because, like the ideal profiles, you tend to find a lot of similarity. And this makes a lot of sense conceptually, logically, but I think it's very, very helpful because it's tangible. What I mean is, what we will see in the profiles is that what we as a leadership team are currently encouraging and creating is very similar to what we're finding in the organization's culture. And this helps to clarify very clearly the connection between leadership and culture, and that leaders really do shape and drive organizational culture. And therefore, if we want something different in the future, it makes a lot of sense for leaders to begin with leadership and for them to take those initial steps. And now, thankfully, they have a framework to understand how this actually plays out. They can see the consequences of their impact in the organization's culture, and also those benefits I mentioned previously of when we remeasure, we're able to see the shift not only in what leaders are encouraging, but in the actual behavioral norms of the organization. Okay, so the benefits, just the top three for combining our OCI culture tool with the leadership impact instrument. Um, Firstly, again, creating that shared leadership mindset of where are we going, what do we want, what should we encourage, what do I need to role model, and having that clarity across leadership teams is tremendous. Secondarily, we have the recognition of impact. So that's what really was my second point previously. We can really illustrate to leaders very clearly in the data and profiles that, again, what we encourage is what for the most part plays out in the business. And if we can understand that and learn to encourage something a little differently, then we can create that more positive, productive culture that we need moving forward. And that really leads directly into the third point of targeted leadership development. So again, not only are we able to measure these factors of impact and culture, but we're able to give leaders enough clarity and specificity to understand exactly what we need to change moving forward in order to drive a different kind of impact and shape our organization's culture in the direction that we want to move. So that is really the benefit of having that wonderful quality data, and thereby the transparency of how leaders drive culture. All right, this leads me to the third combination that I thought would be helpful to just briefly mention. And this is a bit of a deep dive into leadership, but it's the combination of the lifestyles inventory and the impact instruments. So really specifically looking at both leadership behavior in LSI or LWS, as combined with the impact that we as leaders or managers are having with our impact tools. So again, putting the models there for reference. Again, on the bottom, we're looking at thinking and behavioral model of individual behavior, thinking and behavioral patterns, and above, again, the impact model I mentioned previously. The interesting connections, or some of the interesting connections I like to dig into here, are the combinations of the ideal description in combination with the leader's own behavior. So again, when we're talking about a combination here, we're talking about an individual leader who is both completing the LSI as well as the leadership impact assessments. Again, measuring very different things. Won't get into that right now, but with both of those instruments, that gives us a much broader and much deeper perspective of the leader. Again, one of the combinations here that can be helpful is looking at the difference or similarities between the leader's own ideal impact, meaning what kind of behavior I want to encourage and role model and see within the people that I lead, as compared to my own behavior currently. I think that's a very powerful comparison. What do I expect and desire from my team? And a lot of times, again, in that ideal picture, you'll see leaders describing, I want creativity, I want proactive behavior, I want problem solving, I want collaboration. Very insightful and informative for them to then get feedback on the extent to which they currently are perceived by others as behaving in those ways. Am I creative in my role? Do I collaborate with others? Am I walking the talk? Am I role modeling those values? This is actually a whole other level of development within these tools, and I think a very helpful one for leaders to sit back and think about, what do we really need moving forward? And before I even get to the step of trying to encourage that in others, I think I maybe need to try to make sure that I'm able to behave in those ways and role modeling those behaviors myself. And many times for a lot of our clients, and happy to share case studies as well on these topics, but that's a very good first step for leaders. Again, really the first step was creating that shared leadership mindset. What behavior should we be encouraging, role modeling moving forward? The next question, I think, and that's what we're looking at here, is to what extent am I doing that personally? And then the next question is, to what extent am I able to encourage that in others? And what can I do to move that needle? So in any case, again, I think the comparison between my values and what I think good leadership is, what behavior we should be encouraging and role modeling here, as directly compared to what I'm currently encouraging myself, is a very helpful point of transparency. Okay, the second helpful lesson we can draw from this is the connection between LSI, self-description profile, psychological patterns, and strategies that are utilized by leaders. So again, if you're not familiar with these concepts of psychological patterns versus leadership strategies and so on, happy to follow up separately, but to try to keep our webinar session here short and focused, I'm just going to sort of try to get to the point. The point here really is that when we look at how leaders use the authority that they have within organizations, and that refers to the strategies that we're measuring in leadership and management impact, those are influenced quite strongly by the leader's own psychological patterns. The way leaders think obviously directly influences not only how they behave, which is what we're capturing with LSI2, but it also influences the strategies that leaders believe they can and should employ in their roles as a leader. And therefore, we see patterns between thinking styles and strategies utilized. For example, just as a quick one, if you imagine a leader when they describe themselves in LSI1 is really describing themselves and seeing their purpose and role as a leader along the lines of preventing mistakes. You know, sort of my purpose and goal in the organization is to prevent mistakes from happening. Then you can imagine that leader will think in certain ways, risk-oriented ways, trying to find mistakes, point out flaws, correct, learn from mistakes, and so on. That will appear not only in their psychological patterns in the self-description profile of LSI, but it will likely also show up in the way that they, again, not only behave, literally pointing out flaws and so on, but also it will play out in the strategies that they use as leaders. Again, how they use the authority that they have, for example, what they reward versus what they punish, and so on. So recognizing that connection is a pretty deep dive for leaders, but it is, I think, very fascinating for the leaders who have conducted both LSI and one of our impact tools. I always find that they get a tremendous amount out of drawing these connections and the reflections and learnings that we have when we can dig even further. You know, not only understanding how effective am I as a leader and where that's coming from and why, but what is the reason that I've been acting in that way as a leader, utilizing my authority and using the strategies that I have been, questioning some of those maybe assumptions that I've been acting on in the past, and moving forward with some different approach. So those are a couple. Let me see what we had on our list of benefits, combining LSI and the impact tools. Again, the first around aligning with the ideal leadership styles. So this is allowing leaders to compare their current behaviors to their ideal leadership behavior. Very nice comparison point again. I mentioned that one. The second one is a deeper reflection. I think I mentioned this as well, allowing them to see not only their thought patterns and behaviors in LSI, but how those things underpin and influence the strategies that they use as leaders within their role. Pretty deep stuff, but fascinating as well. And finally, helps in terms of understanding and creating improved behavior change, helps leaders to understand how their behavior and use of strategies influences others. And to be honest with you, I've always found that when leaders have this complete picture, they're also able to understand how those factors have influenced them personally over time. So this is another really benefit of LSI, and especially our impact tools, is it helps leaders to understand not only behavior, but how behavior is shaped and encouraged and facilitated in organizations and by leaders. And they can see that not only in the teams that they lead, but they can see it in how they've been led before and the effects that that's had on them. So that's a very nice kind of learning experience, eye-opening, I find, and tremendously helpful to then enable them to take steps forward and create positive development. All right. This has been yet again one of our webinars. I hope this has been helpful and informative. To those of you who are accredited in HS Tools, I'm sure these concepts will have landed hopefully with some clarity. For those of you who perhaps are new to HS Tools, this may have been a bit abstract, but hopefully you were able to recognize a few of the concepts. And if it interests you, please feel free to reach out anytime, and happy to help you dig deeper. If there's anyone out there with any questions, please feel free to type those into the chat. I'll hang on here for another minute or so just to see if there are any other questions from anyone. Otherwise, we will conclude the webinar for today. I hope you got some good learnings out of it. And again, we always record these sessions, so that will be available on our website, humansynergistics.de for our site. Under the resources and videos tab, you can see not only the full recording of this session, but all of the past webinars and sessions I've conducted previously. So if this sounded interesting and you might want something more, please have a look there as well. All right, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I must have answered them all very effectively, I can only assume. So thank you again for anyone and everyone who's joined in. I hope this was helpful, and please reach out if we can be of any further assistance. Thank you very much.